We're going to get started talking about how to use After Effects, and we're going in at this at a very cursory level. There are other classes later on in the college that can give you more information, but this will give you the real basics and allow you to at least complete the assignment. So some things to look at. This is somewhat similar to Premiere. You have a project window here, the composition window where you'll actually see what you're making, a timeline down here, some different informational panels, including effects and presets over here. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and create a new composition. You can do it from that window, but we can also come up here to Composition, New. We can decide, in the case of your assignment, we want to do 600 by 600, and we're going to uncheck that lock aspect ratio. By default, it wants to use a traditional screen aspect ratio, but let's say this animation is just a piece to a larger project. By frame rate, in most cases, since we're here in the US, we want to use the NTSC, which is this 29.97. If you were in Europe, you might choose 25. There's a range of options in here and different reasons to use those. You also want to look at in the time code, you're doing a 15-second animation. So you want to just set the duration to that so you don't have extra time. Look at duration. We start always with hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. So we want to go ahead and change the frames from 30 to 15. And then background color, you don't have to stick with black. You can do a different color if it's appropriate for your assignment. But for right now, I think for my purposes, black will work just fine. I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and it's going to go ahead and show me what. And you'll see a comp over here. You can always name these to keep track of them. You also can nest a comp in a comp, meaning if I made another comp, I could put this comp inside of it. That can become useful when you work on more complex projects. Now on screen, we can do a variety of things. I could start typing text, but for purposes of the assignment, you had to bring in a logo. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to go to File, Import File. And you'll notice there's a variety of different items, including multiple. You can bring in Illustrator files. You also can continue to maintain layers and separate pieces. So if you want to animate one part of your logo separate from the other, that is also an option. I've pulled the College of Journalism's logo just to use for demonstration purposes. And we can see that's loaded in the file. Now, it's not automatically loaded to your project yet. You can click and drag it to the timeline, and now it will be added to your project. Notice it put it a little further out. I might have to actually stretch this just a little bit to make it fit. It doesn't matter. You'll also notice it's not the right size. I could leave it at that size. Maybe that's where I want it to start. Or I often like to position my endpoint for this so I can rescale it, and it should resize the resolution to get the item bigger. So we're going to ignore the resolution right now and just focus on what we're doing. So this maybe is where I want this to end. So I always like to set up my endpoint and work backwards. Other people do stuff different ways. So when we look down here on the menu, we want to go ahead. I'm going to do the little twirl down, and I'll see options. Transform will be the main one. For what you most likely want to do, or at least the basic level, these are more than adequate. Position, scale, rotation, and opacity will do so many things for you. So let's start by saying I wanted to start it really small and get bigger. So I want to scale it. I want to change the scale of it. Okay. So I could come here, and the way After Effects works, we have this little stopwatch here. You may hear other people call it something different, but I've always called it a stopwatch. It looks like a stopwatch. An important thing to remember with After Effects, once you press the stopwatch, do not press it again. I can't say that enough. Do not press it again. Once you press it again, you get rid of everything you've just done. So if you want to get rid of everything you've just done, go ahead and press it again. But if you don't want to get rid of all your hard work, do not press it again. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to, before I press it, I'm going to move my current time indicator all the way out to 15 seconds because like I said, this is my end point. So what happens when I press the stopwatch is it's going to go ahead, it's going to put this blue sort of triangle-y diamond-y dot on there. That's called a keyframe. And it's going to go ahead and add that in. And that's going to be a starting keyframe. I'm going to come and move my timeline, my little time slider here all the way back to the beginning. And now I'm going to scale this all the way down. And you'll notice it added another, and I'll point it out in a second, it added a keyframe. So I'm going to make it as small as possible, but it added a keyframe here. So it will automatically, once you've pressed the stopwatch, it will automatically add keyframes. You can also force it to put keyframes in there, but in general, usually it's sufficient. So now if I do what we call scrubbing the timeline, which is to take this timeline slider and sort of drag it, you'll notice it grows. Our logo grows. So we've used the scale function. I could also set up opacity. So again, starting here at the end, I'm going to go ahead and click the opacity stopwatch. So it's going to set a keyframe. It's going to default to 100. I'm going to come here down to the end. This time, instead of doing it on screen, opacity can't really be done on screen. I'm going to go ahead and click on the little slider. You notice before I clicked, I get the little hand. I could have also dragged it backwards, or I can click on here, as I did a second ago, and type a value. Either one is fine. Again, it added a keyframe, and now you'll notice it also does a little bit of fading in. Two other ones I can do are rotation. Probably not appropriate in this case with the logo, but to show you, we'll do rotation next. I'll leave rotation here. I'm going to go ahead and set rotation. I'm actually going to have it rotate starting, maybe not at the beginning, just so you can see it. I'm going to go ahead and I can use the values here. Again, select something. So now if I wanted to, I'll notice it rotates too. Okay. The last one is position. That is useful. Again, we'll have it move from the side. Not the most useful, not the most, for this particular one, super useful for what you might want to do, but not necessarily appropriate for the solution. Again, by clicking it, I set my endpoint, go back, and I can move this over. If I hold shift, once I start moving, it will keep it in alignment. That can be beneficial to you. I go ahead and again, I can scrub it and I see it moves and rotates into place. So I don't know that I would always recommend all of these together, but they are options. Text has its own set of options. There's a whole range of things you can do, but those are the basic ones that you might use. There are also effects and presets you can look at that deal more with color. There's some text effects, things like that. But for most of you, what you want to do with your logo animation, you could do with those 4 skills. You can have multiple layers, so you can introduce multiple items. You might want to have the logo in separate pieces. If I had this font, I could even do an effect where it loaded in the words as the N appears. There's a wide range of options. This is literally just the tip of the iceberg with After Effects, but it gives you an idea how to get started and how to do some really easy, basic things that can produce some nice animations.